Hello, it is here, Boothby from Sojourn Psychology. And one of the things that I'm really interested in right now is just getting back to some of my own roots, looking at compulsive behaviors, patterns of maladaptive behaviors. I did the little vlog on psychocompulsive behaviors, which comes from a lot of the addictions and recovery curriculum. So today I want to talk about the stages of change. And now, stages of change is really interesting. Normally, we break them down into pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and maintenance. It's pretty typical. But I really appreciate Terence Gorski. So, Gorski is one of the main credited individuals for harm reduction. And harm reduction was really like a breath of fresh air for recovery culture, largely in the 90s and the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, we started to have this refresh about existential recovery, meaning focused recovery, wellness based recovery, and then also to considering harm reduction and how to do harm reduction well, maintenance management, all these different really interesting things. So the stages of change, when you think of that language, pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and then maintenance, it really does make sense. But sometimes where some of our error thinking occurs when we just break it down into those categories is that we can believe that these stages are static, that if I am pre-contemplative, if I'm not really paying attention, maybe I'm living in some denial, I'm not aware of whatever it is that is causing me harm, that's the only sort of category I am in. And then contemplation, sometimes I talk about this as like the wishing I wanted it. So if you've ever wanted to go to the gym or you want to eat healthier, those are really great normal examples where most everyone has a story of when I wish I wanted it. I really wish I wanted to work out, but I just kind of don't. I haven't been able to like flip the switch. Action is really about flipping the switch. And then maintenance is more so about what are those things that I do for relapse prevention, those things I do to take care of my new changed behavior to increase the strength of the neural pathway towards the better choice, to limit my connection to the maladaptive behavior, the compulsive behavior, the addiction or the pattern that's causing me harm. So let's go to Gorski stuff here. Gorski breaks the relapse recovery process, is what his language is, into 6 categories. And they sound more clinical, but what's lovely with Gorski is he really advocates that we're not going to be in just one category. We're going to be all over the place. And we're also facing more than one maladaptive behavior at a time. So if, again, using the example of like diet and exercise, that's not together. Those are 2 things. So my strategy with making better choices with food, with not eating all the candy that all of a sudden I have in my house post Halloween, alongside of my choices and my strategies to get myself into the action of physical activity. So they're beside each other, but diet and exercise are actually 2 different behaviors. And so we have these stages of change going on simultaneously. And also with each item, so with diet and with exercise, I'm going to have different nuances of where I'm at with both of those behaviors that I'm trying to change. Okay, so going back to the relapse recovery process. So pre-treatment, and this is really, it's interesting. So we're noticing there's a stage where somebody is starting to consider there's something going on for me that I need to give up control of. Like there's something that is actually controlling me. It's becoming a source of religion. I am becoming ritualistic. I am ritualistic about this thing, this behavior, this choice point. And there's all types of things that we could be misusing, not just drugs and alcohol, not just sex, not just food. There's all sorts of things that we try to control, and they really get us disconnected from our inner working model. So in this phase, we were starting to notice, okay, this isn't working. I want to develop some motivation. And I'm trying to consider problem solving. Like, is there a strategy? I might not be talking about it with other people, but I'm starting to get more cognizant of like, what would my life be like if I didn't eat all the Halloween candy that's in my house? What would my life be like? So there's sort of this like, I'm wondering, but I'm not quite necessarily taking steps of action. And then stabilization. So recuperate from the damage. So right here, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to make some changes here. And I'm starting to wonder or notice when I make attempts to change the behavior that I get some benefit. So I'm attempting to abstain. I'm attempting maintenance management. Maintenance management is an interesting philosophy in recovery culture. So maintenance management is I'm making better choices to control the behavior that's causing me harm without giving it up. That's not harm reduction. That's maintenance management. I'm choosing a substance that does less damage rather than giving up my maladaptive behavior altogether. Maintenance management, not harm reduction. Harm reduction is reducing the risk of complication or comorbidity because of use. Okay, so when I'm seeking stabilization or I'm entering into it, I'm accepting the need for help. So I'm starting to talk about my problem. I'm getting outside of my inner working model. I'm starting to activate my voice. I'm starting to hear myself speak about what's going on for me. And then there's some of the noticing of like withdrawal symptoms are going to show up here. I'm aware of the physical consequences, and I'm starting to consider working through those withdrawal symptoms, and that I don't want to keep entering into the withdrawal symptoms. So then there's some of this like, well, maybe I want more abstinence. Maybe I want complete abstinence from whatever this maladaptive behavior is. And then I'm starting to try to interrupt the ritualistic thinking patterns, the thoughts and feelings like I spoke about with the cycle of addiction. So I'm trying to interrupt and I'm trying to have my own impact on the automatic behavior that I actually don't want to have any longer. Then we look at these different phases of recovering from maladaptive behavior. So early recovery, middle recovery, late recovery. So this is more of the action zone. This is also what's nice here. Action is just not like, yeah, I mean, a lot of times it is you flip the switch and you're doing it, but there's a nuanced phase. And this is where I really do like the 12-step curriculum, because the 12-step curriculum gives us a lovely bridge from the old maladaptive cycle to the new cycle in recovery. The phase in between those two cycles can be quite lonely. That's where higher power consideration, that's where community consideration, that's where having a curriculum where I do a study with a group of people, I have a mentor who comes alongside of me or sponsor, all those things actually work really, really well to support somebody through. What we know now, great book, The Naked Mind, it's really on alcohol recovery. But the real shift, the predictor of change with addictive patterns is a subconscious, is a more internal shift of thought and belief patterns. It's not necessarily the like going through the motions of say 12 steps or a recovery program. Now we know that. We know that because just going to a recovery center does not make one successful at recovering. Going to therapy does not make one stop compulsive behavior. Psychological care doesn't cure something like OCD, right? So there's all these different things of like, oh, okay, like something inside of me working through my internal working model, my view of self, my view of others, my view of higher power, the God that I know. So early, middle, and late recovery. So the early recovery is this internal change starts to occur. Middle recovery is there's some external repair. So some of our relationships are starting to mend. Late recovery, growing beyond childhood limitations. So this is where our psychological and our spiritual formation starts to really manifest. This makes so much sense because when we're working in the early stages of withdrawal, a lot of it is like rooted in the internal change, the psych ed, the making sense of my problem, the cognitive behavioral stuff, the real like, putting my wheels on so that I can get some days and weeks and then months behind me before I start to really maybe work on my external repair, my relationships with others, And then I can deepen into further repair with my view of self. So there's a lot in the recovery, the action phase, that's lingering in our view of self and view of others. Early recovery. So we're just really seeking short-term stabilization. We want a lot of stabilization. We want to know why we're doing what we're doing to have stabilization and to see what's working for our own stabilization. It's individualized as well, is a different thing. It's not a one shot for all kind of jargon. It's like, okay, what works for Tara? I love the wellness wheel. That's something that really works for me. I have friends that have a lot of roots in more of the existential psychology wheelhouse. I love that. I appreciate that. Wellness wheel is really great for me. Something rooted more in, say, Paul Wong's philosophies or Yalom or things like that might work better for somebody else. It's interesting. It's individualized. It's about my internal shift of thought, my perceptions and my beliefs that are going to better help connect my inner working model to my outside world. So early recovery, we want stabilization. We're working for some acceptance. We want awareness. We want commitment, those sorts of things. Middle recovery, resolving the demoralization crisis. So the demoralization crisis, the best cliche language we have is like the walk of shame. So those painful consequences, the painful beliefs about ourselves, the things that we've done, the relationships that we've hurt, our moral inventory, are making amends. Some of those things that we're starting to consider in this phase of like, why did I do that? What was I doing? Because those negative consequences, like we learned about in the cycle of addiction, reinforce the cycle. But now we're starting to address my internal consequences, my negative view of self and my negative view of others starts to really manifest here. And then repairing the social damage, better self-regulation. So again, from the attachment perspective, this is more of the self-regulation, the co-regulation. Interesting theories on attachment science, love science, and the impact on addiction and recovery. I can do something on that later. There's some really cool stuff about that. And in mid recovery, we're having more and more life balance. This is where the wellness wheel works exceptionally well, because people who have better physical health, so really diet and exercise is a great tool for helping us to stay in our window of tolerance and to help us make better and better choices for our behaviors. But social, emotional, intellectual, physical, again, occupational, and spiritual balance is all really, really key. So we're starting to navigate and have a better sense of who am I and how am I in relationship with myself and others. That's a lot of the middle recovery stuff. Starting to see how there's a fluidity here. And even when I get better balance in middle recovery, it makes sense that I might go back to previous thought patterns or difficulties and check in with different parts of this grid. I also could have emotional and psychological pain and give up completely and then go back to some earlier stages. But I already have traction and I already have more understanding of why I do the things that I do. So then when I seek to re-enter better choices with behavior, all of that stuff is already there. It's pretty cool. Like it's just nice to normalize that we don't completely lose all of our footing when we give back into poor choice patterns. Late recovery, so growing beyond childhood limitations. This is like a lot more of the psychological work, like the attachment wounds, our unmet attachment needs, our attachment fears, our fears about being in connection with others, our fears about not being in connection with others, our experience of being weak and gone, all of our attachment hurts, our broken primary care relationships, our connections to our siblings, the different experiences that we had as a child and our child brain making sense of those and how those thought patterns have continued and they cause us harm because what we don't know about ourselves in our younger years, in our younger thought formation, still has roots. I think, is it Bowlby? I'm pretty sure it's Bowlby that says what is not accepted by the mother is not integrated by the child. And so there's some of these things where our people are just people and they don't get everything right for us. And then as little kids, we're kind of left alone to figure those things out. That's just how development works. And yeah, sometimes big people do absolutely terrible things to little people, but sometimes as big people, we just hurt little people by accident or without knowing. Also, a lot of big people aren't very good at repairing. We're not good at saying, I'm sorry. We're not good at amends. We're not good at reconciliation. And so these little kids don't get that. And hence, it's really ironic that a big part of recovering from maladaptive behavior is then we work through our own process of amends, forgiveness, reconciliation. I will add in the spiritual formation word of restoration. So the late recovery, resolution of family of origin issues, develop intimacy skills, that's attachment stuff, establishing a basic integrating role, and reorganizing lifestyle around that role. So I am like better acquainted with my internal working model, and then I can have better boundaries and expectations of how the world around me can wrap around this healthier view of self. It's a really interesting shift for people who have rigid boundaries. They can soften. People who have no boundaries can start having them. The fence jumpers can start realizing like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be jumping over everybody else's boundaries. Powerful, good, healthy. And then maintenance. And maintenance is just continued growth and development. This is a space of the existential epiphany. We face existential crisis and we can, be crumbled by it. We can become resentful. We can become bitter. We can have all these limitations. We can enter back into maladaptive thoughts and behaviors. We touch existential crisis and we can be resurrected into existential epiphany. And that is really the goal of maintenance, is continued growth and development. So we're maintaining our better behaviors. We are reinforcing them with all the strategies that we're wrapping around. We are mindful of the early parts of our recovery that have given us wisdom, the middle parts and the latter parts. And we are moving between those three categories and how we respond to our view of self and our view of others, to just continue to grow forward into our healthier, happier, recovery-based cycle of life. Effective day-to-day coping, continued growth and development, effective coping with life transactions and complicating factors. So we're just evolving into into the position of eldering is what David Tenson would talk about, into these places of being a wise other, a stronger, wiser other, bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, that we can be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind with our inner self, as well that we can be a mentor to those that come along after us, just like those who would have helped and been mentors and companions on the trail as we were entering into making better choices to move forward in our lives. So that's a lot. I talked fast. But I really do think that Terence Gorski is fabulous if you want to read his stuff. Very smart individual. Stages of Change is more well known. Really just taking some time to consider where am I in my own stages of change, and lingering in that position, be honoring where you're at, paying attention to where you're at, because that is how we keep moving forward. Okay, peace, love, catch you later.